Earlier in this course, I talked about how objects are everywhere in JavaScript. With the exception of primitives, everything else is an object. So as we discussed at that time, functions are objects. The fact that functions are objects is such an important feature. It leads to functions being first-class citizens in JavaScript. Now, the idea that functions are first class simply means that functions are treated as values that can be passed around. And since functions are objects, that is what makes this possible. So when we think of a value, we normally think of something like a string or a number. While any place a value, like a string or a number, can be used, a function can be used also, because they are treated as values, which makes them first class. To cement this idea, let's look at several examples where traditional values can be used and show that a function can be used in the same place. Now, the first two examples are pretty obvious. We can assign a value like a number to a variable. Well, we can assign a function to a variable as well. And we've done it a lot of times already. Anytime we create a function expression like is shown here, we are assigning that function to a variable. And so that's pretty common. That's not strange to us at this point. Now, before I show the second example, which is also a pretty obvious one, I want to show something about functions here and how they're assigned to the variable. We have fun10. Now, what if I were to do something like this? What if I created another variable and did fun10a and set that equal to fun10? So what's happening here? Well, since functions are objects, what it's doing is it's assigning a reference to this same function right here, assigning another reference to fun10a. It is not invoking the function and placing a 10 in fun10a. Remember, that's a distinct difference. We have to use parentheses in order to invoke a function. So let's just look at this really quick. If we were to look at fun10a in the console, let me just open that up. We see that it's a function. That's what we're getting displayed here is a function. However, if we were to invoke fun10a by putting parens after it, then we get the 10 returned, which is what that function is supposed to do. So, important point about using the variable a function is assigned to. If we don't put parens after it, it will not invoke that function. All right, now the second example that we want to look at, I'm just going to scroll it up here, is a function can be assigned to a property of an object. Now, we've seen that many times already. So that's why this one's an obvious one as well. Basically, const obj and set that equal to an object like this. And then if we do fun colon, and then here's where we would put the function that's assigned to that. And this one's just going to log fun. Now, remember to invoke this, we use the dot syntax. We simply do obj dot, and then whatever property it's assigned to, in this case fun. And once again, we use the double parens to invoke it. Okay. Now, this, as we've seen before, can be done with a shortcut method like that. That would accomplish the same thing, setting up a function there. And we get fun logged to the console. I'm going to close this just a bit so we can see that console. All right, so that's the second one. Those ones were two obvious ones. So the third one, maybe not quite as obvious. And this one is a function can be stored in an array. So let's set up an array here. And we're going to put a number in there. A value can go into array. We already know that. But can we put a function in there as well? Well, yes, we can. And this time I'm going to do an arrow function. Basically, it's just going to return 10 like we've done in the past. So now we have a function in the second position of this array. And we can invoke that using the parens again. So we have to indicate the position in the in the array like that, and then we just put parens after it. That will invoke it. So this should return 10. So if we log that to the console like that, we should get 10 on the console. And there we go. I commented out this one up here, so the 10's the only thing we're seeing up there. So a value can be stored in an array, and a function can be stored in an array. Now, a function can be part of an expression, just like a value is. Let's take a look at this one. I'm going to do a simple console.log, and inside of there I'm going to put an expression so we can see the results of that expression. Here's the expression. I'm just going to do 30 plus what? Well, we're going to do a function. So I'm going to declare a function in here, and I'm going to have it return 10. Now, right now this isn't going to add 30 plus 10 because this function's not invoked. We just declared it in here. So if we were to save this, let me comment out that. If we were to save this, it just concatenates the text of that function to the number 30. However, if we were to invoke it, and this is immediately invoking it, and this is a topic we're going to discuss in this section in more detail later, but if I put double parens right after that, now let's see what happens. Now it invokes the function, returns a 10, and then adds 30 to 10. And so we put a function as a part of an expression, just like we could any other value. Now, to do the same thing, just so you're aware, to do the same thing with an arrow function, you would need to do something like this, 30 plus, and then here's our arrow function, and if we define that, fat arrow there, of returning 10, that's great, except we can't immediately put parens after that. We have to enclose the entire thing in parentheses like this. Then we can put parens after it. Now we should get 2 console log statements of 40. And there we go. So that's how you would do it with an arrow function. Now, the next example, we can pass values into a function. A number can be passed into a function. A string can be passed into a function. Well, so can functions be passed into functions. So think callbacks. We've done a lot with callbacks. And that is an example of where we're passing a function into another function. So the most common example we've probably done in this course is using setTimeout. So setTimeout has 2 parameters. One is a function that we pass in, and the other is the amount of time in milliseconds. And so that would be 1 second there. This first parameter is just a function we pass in. And I can do an arrow function there for this one, and we'll just console.log. Time is up. Something like that. So here we're passing a function into another function. So if we save this, we get the 240s. A second later, we get the time is up displayed to the console. Now, the final example we want to look at is a function can be returned from a function. So down here at the bottom. So just like we can pass a function into a function, we can return one as well. So let me set something up. Get fun. Set that equal. We're declaring a function here. And what are we going to return? Well, we're going to return a function. I'm going to declare this here after the return statement. And we'll just have it console log. Let's see. I was returned. We'll just have it do that. So that's our return statement. And what are we returning? Well, we could return a number. We could return a string. We can return a function because it is treated as a value. So now with this set up, if we go const new fun, we're going to store the function in here that's returned and set that equal to get fun and use the parens to invoke it. Let's go ahead and save that. Here's our console logs we have up there. But now let's see what new fun contains. Now if I put new fun here, Without the parens, we'll see the text of that function. But if I do new fun with parens and have it invoke, then we get the return value. We get the console log statement, not the return value. So there we're returning a function. Now something we can do here, I've assigned the return function to a variable, but I could also just call getFun like this, and that's going to return a function. Well, what if we wanted to invoke that function that's returned? We can just enter another set of parens right after it. So this first parens act on the getFun function. The next set of parens act on this function that is returned and cause that function to be invoked. So now, if we go ahead and save this, we should see I was returned on the console. And there's our I was returned. There's our set timeout console log statement. So there's a total of 6 examples of how we can use a function just like we would use any other value, such as a number or a string. Because a function in JavaScript is treated as a value, and that's why it's first class. That's why we call functions in JavaScript first class. All right, now these last 2 examples we looked at, we're going to delve into more detail in the next topic when we talk about higher order functions.